You know, for most people, the Oscars are just a single Sunday night. You order the pizza, you judge the outfits on the red carpet, complain about who won Best Picture, and then you basically go to bed and forget about it until next year.
Right, absolutely.
But looking at the absolute mountain of reports, the Guild memos, and this deep statistical analysis we have on the desk today, that view is honestly a hallucination.
It really is. Treating the Academy Awards like it's just one night of television is, I mean, it's like looking at a single wedding photo and thinking you understand the entire 10 years of relationship negotiation that led up to that specific moment.
Exactly. And right now, we are deep in that negotiation phase. It is late February 2026. The machinery of Hollywood is absolutely humming. And what we're realizing from this research is that the Oscars aren't really a TV show at all.
No, not at all.
They are essentially a months-long film festival that just happens to end on television.
That is probably the best way to frame it. It is this massive festival ecosystem. You've got the private screenings, the Q&A speeches, strategy meetings, endless cocktail parties, and just this incredible amount of soft power networking. And it's all culminating on March 15th, 2026 for the 98th Academy Awards.
So today, for you listening, we are going to do a deep dive into this specific season's source material. And let me tell you, the temperature is extremely high.
Oh, yeah.
Our mission today is to decode the narratives, because there are some really wild ones this year. We're going to look at the structural changes, specifically this massive new casting category that actually changes how movies are promoted. And we're going to look at the gossip that really drives the weather patterns in Hollywood.
And we're pulling all this from a great stack of analysis regarding the nomination statistics, the new Academy rules on AI and voting, which are, frankly, fascinating.
Right.
And the precursor awards like the Directors Guild and the Golden Globes.
Right. So, okay, let's unpack the headline first, because you just cannot talk about the 2026 Oscars without talking about the absolute juggernaut that is Sinners.
It is the elephant in the room, or rather the giant on the screen. Sinners, directed by Ryan Coogler, is leading the pack with a record-breaking 16 nominations.
16. I really want to pause on that number for a second, because I think it's easy to gloss over stats when you hear them all the time. That breaks historical records.
Yeah, completely shatters them.
That is an absurd number of nominations for a single film.
It is. I mean, when you look at history, you had films like Titanic, All About Eve, and La La Land all tying at 14, getting to 16. That signals something very, very specific about where the Academy's head is at right now.
What does it signal to you based on the reports? Because usually a movie gets a lot of technical awards or gets the acting awards. It rarely gets absolutely everything across the board.
Exactly. Sinners getting 16 nominations suggests the Academy is finally ready to embrace genre, scale, cultural specificity, and big studio ambition all at the exact same time. This isn't your tiny, traditional prestige drama.
No, not at all.
It's a horror thriller, it's a period piece, and it functions as an art film. They like the sound, they like the lights, the editing, the costumes.
And the acting. You've got Michael B. Jordan landing a Best Actor nomination.
Which the sources are heavily describing as this massive, it's about time moment in the industry. He's been doing incredible work for years, but this just feels like the absolute culmination of his creative partnership with Coogler.
Right. Ryan Coogler is really at the center of this whole conversation. But here's where the sources point out. It gets fascinating from a psychological perspective, and this is where the actual game of the season really kicks in. When you have a film that dominates the nominations this heavily, it creates basically two possible outcomes in the voter's mind.
The momentum versus the fatigue.
Precisely. Does breaking records create this unstoppable momentum where everyone just agrees, yes, this is the year of Sinners, get on the train? Or does seeing the number 16 trigger a subconscious share the wealth backlash among the voters?
That is the classic tall poppy syndrome. A voter looks at the ballot and thinks, well, they have 16 nominations. They're definitely going to win sound, VFX, and cinematography. They do not need my vote for Best Picture.
Right, like they'll be fine without me.
Exactly. Voters like to feel like they are discovering something or, saving something. It is practically impossible to feel like you're saving a movie that just got 16 Oscar nominations. And that psychological opening brings us right to the rival camp, because right on its heels is One Battle After Another.
Directed by the legendary Paul Thomas Anderson.
Yes. And this is the narrative of pure industry respect. If Sinners is the explosion, One Battle After Another is the architecture. The reporting frames this film as the safe consensus option. It's got the craftsmanship, it has intense campaign discipline, and it came in very strong across the major nominations.
So if you're a voter who thinks Sinners is too pop or too genre or just too big, you automatically go to PTA.
That's the binary the media really likes to set up. Sinners is the explosive blockbuster achievement, while One Battle After Another is the masterclass in traditional precise filmmaking. It represents cinema with a capital C. But, crucially, our sources emphasize it's not just a two-horse race this year. We have to talk about Hamnet.
Directed by Chloe Zhao. Now, this one feels very different in the reading. The sources describe it as occupying the prestige literary lane.
It's the actor-forward option. Especially in the UK coverage we looked at, this is framed as the film with the lingering emotional aftertaste. It's soulful. It's quiet.
And frankly, looking at the international presence this year, global cinema isn't just a side quest anymore.
No, absolutely not. A few years ago, international films were essentially ghettoized in their own separate category. Now, you've got films like The Secret Agent, and it was just an accident showing up in major categories like screenplay and directing. The voting body has become significantly more global, and the nominations directly reflect that reality.
And even in the indie world, look at the Spirit Awards data. Train Dreams won big there. And Rose Byrne is getting huge momentum for If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You.
Which is frankly the best title of the entire year.
It really, really is. But what does that indie surge tell us in the context of these giants?
It proves that even in a year where you have massive studio titans like Coogler and Anderson battling it out with these huge budgets, there is still room for a smaller film to launch a career-defining performance. That's that discovery element we talked about earlier. Voters love to be the ones to say, but did you actually see Rose Byrne? It makes them feel astute and deeply tapped into the craft.
Okay, I want to pivot now to something that I think is actually the biggest story of the year, structurally speaking. It might sound a bit inside baseball to the casual viewer, but according to our sources, this changes everything about how the season actually works.
You're talking about the new category.
The new category. For the first time in over 20 years, we have a competitive Oscar for achievement in casting.
This is a massive structural shift. People outside the industry might just think, oh, it's just another trophy to hand out, make the broadcast 10 minutes longer. But inside, this changes the entire ecosystem of the awards season.
Why is it such a big deal, though? Break that down for us.
It's all about visibility and campaign strategy. Casting has traditionally been a behind-the-scenes, almost entirely invisible craft. The casting director is usually the first person on the movie and the first person off. They operate in the shadows. Now suddenly they are thrust into the spotlight, and it forces a completely new type of campaign. You can't just say, hey, watch our movie. You have to actively explain how the ensemble was built.
And the irony of this is just delicious to me. You have these casting directors, people listed in the reports like Cassandra Kulu-Kundis for One Battle After Another, Nina Gold for Hamnet, Francine Maisler for Sinners, who are arguably some of the most private, press-averse people in the entire industry.
They famously hate the press. Their entire job relies on deep discretion. They know exactly who auditioned and failed. They know who was the studio's second or third choice. They know where all the bodies are buried, so to speak.
And now they're up on stage doing Q&As. They're sitting on panels.
They are. The sources mentioned Jennifer Venditti for Marty Supreme and Gabriel Dominguez for The Secret Agent are in the exact same boat. They suddenly have to articulate their secret process to the public. And what's fascinating is how the Academy set this up. They were very smart about it. They really didn't want it to just turn into a basic popularity contest for the movie with the most famous stars.
Right. I was reading in the rules about the bake-off mechanics. It sounds intense. Can you explain what a bake-off is in this specific context?
So usually a bake-off refers to the visual effects or makeup branches narrowing down their shortlists. They've applied a very similar logic here. They established specific guardrails to keep the focus strictly on the craft. There were pre-recorded casting interviews in multiple cities. But the most interesting rule is the bake-off reel.
A reel, like a highlight reel of the movie.
Yes, but with a major catch. They put a strict 5-minute cap on the presentation reel.
So the studios can't just cut a 5-minute trailer that looks cool and relies on the director's vision.
Exactly. That was the big fear, that best casting would just become best ensemble acting or a movie with the most celebrities. The Academy flat out said no. The reel has to strictly demonstrate the craft of casting. The guidelines imply showing things like the chemistry reads, explaining the logic of the choices, showcasing the mix of discovery talent versus established talent.
It essentially prevents it from being a stealth marketing tool for Best Picture.
Ideally, yes. It has to be about the construction of the cast. It's a huge step forward for recognizing how movies are actually made, not just how they look when they're totally finished and polished.
Speaking of how movies are made and how they are watched, there are some new unwritten rules this year that our sources say are causing a lot of chatter at the lunch tables.
Well, one of them is actually a completely written rule now, the verified viewing policy.
Watch to vote.
Yes. The new policy is that members must legitimately watch every single nominee in a category to vote in the final round.
Which sounds perfectly reasonable to us on the outside. I mean, if you're judging a pie contest, you should naturally taste all the pies. But I bet that caused an absolute panic in the guilds.
Whoa, it's the main topic of conversation at every single screening. The reporting says members are constantly talking about it, saying, yes, you really have to watch them all now, because historically, let's just be honest, people voted for their friends, or they voted for the movie they casually saw on the plane, or they voted for the movie their agency represents.
Does this actually change the winners, though?
That is the million-dollar question. Does it change the results, or does it just change how people lie about what they've seen? It's notoriously hard to enforce perfectly, but it definitely changes the vibe of the season. You can't just blindly vote for your friend's movie without at least claiming you sat down and watched the other four. It theoretically hurts the massive blockbusters that everyone has seen anyway, and helps the smaller films that people might have previously skipped.
It levels the playing field, in theory.
In theory.
And then there's the technology aspect. The Academy had to take a firm stance on AI. We saw this coming a mile away with the guild strikes last year.
They did, and it's a very careful, deliberate stance. The official guidance from the Academy is that generative AI neither helps nor harms a film's prospects on its own.
So they're treating it as entirely neutral.
For now, yes. This is the industry trying to write the norms while the ground is literally moving under their feet. The focus remains heavily on human creative authorship. So basically saying we're judging the human choices here even if digital tools are involved. It's especially relevant for the writing and the craft branches. If you used AI to, say, generate a background texture, fine. But if AI wrote the core dialogue, that's where the hard line gets drawn.
It really feels like this season is a mix of celebrating the art and also strictly defining what the actual job is.
It absolutely is. And that underlying tension plays out in the festival atmosphere we talked about at the top of the show. You know, the nominees' luncheon on February 10th was described by attendees as the friendliest pressure cooker.
I love that description.
It's so accurate. You have that classic class photo dynamic. These are direct competitors, yes, but they're also coworkers swapping war stories. They're talking about weather disasters on set or scheduling nightmares. It's a moment of détente before the final voting rush begins. It's where you see Lady Gaga casually chatting with a sound editor. It really humanizes the entire race.
So we've got the narratives, we've got the rules, we've got the tension. Now let's play meteorologist for a minute. We need to forecast the weather using the data we have.
The proxy battles.
Exactly. Because we don't know who wins the Oscar until that envelope opens, but we have these signals, these other awards bodies that heavily hint at where the wind is blowing. Let's start with the Directors Guild, the DGA.
This is a big one. Paul Thomas Anderson won Top Feature, directing at the DGA for one battle after another.
And historically, what does that mean?
Historically, that is one of the most predictive wins for the Oscars. The overlapping membership between the DGA and the Academy's directing branch is extremely high. If you win the DGA, you are in a very, very good position for Best Director. It signals that your peers, the people who actually do the job day in and day out, think you did the absolute best work.
Okay, so PTA has the DGA locked, but then look at the Critics' Choice Awards data.
Right. They named one battle after another Best Picture. That really solidifies it as the consensus choice. Critics' Choice doesn't always predict the ultimate winner, but it tells you what the smart money is on. It's not just a critic's darling. It has incredibly broad support across the pundit class.
But then you look at the Golden Globes, and the narrative gets messy again.
The Globes love to spread the love. It was a totally split narrative. One battle and Hamnet won major film awards in their specific lanes, drama, musical, and comedy. But Sinners took the Cinematic and Box Office Achievement Prize.
Which is a newer award. It actively links the cultural financial impact to the award's impact.
Exactly. It reminds voters that Sinners isn't just a movie, it's a cultural phenomenon. And that matters when you're filling out a ballot in your living room. Do you vote for the best crafted film or the one that undeniably defined the year? The Academy has been desperate for cultural relevance for a decade. awarding a massive hit like Sinners solves their relevance problem instantly.
And we're in the sprint right now. It's late February. We've got the BAFTAs coming up on February 22nd at the Royal Festival Hall.
And Hamnet is heavily framed in the UK press as having the home advantage there. If Hamnet sweeps the BAFTAs, suddenly we have a legitimate three-way race. It completely disrupts the binary between Sinners and One Battle.
And then the SAG Awards, the Screen Actors Guild, on March 1st, streaming on Netflix again.
That's the final giant temperature check. Actors make up the largest single voting block in the Academy. If the actors break for Sinners, it's basically over. If they break for Hamnet or One Battle, it's a total dogfight. Voting closes on March 5th. So whatever happens at SAG could swing the undecided voters at the very last possible second.
Let's shift gears and talk about the broadcast itself. The logistics, the gossip, the fun stuff from the memos. We've got Conan O'Brien returning as host.
A very solid choice.
Yeah.
He's a veteran. He knows exactly how to handle a tough room.
But what's the strategy outlined in the reports? Because hosting the Oscars is arguably the hardest job in show business. You're performing for a room of people who are terrified they're going to lose, and half of them haven't eaten a carb for 3 days.
Conan has been pretty public about his approach this year. He stated he will largely avoid President Trump jokes.
Really? That's surprising given the climate. Usually late-night hosts lean into that heavily, especially in an election cycle or post-election cycle. And just to be clear to you listening, we are not endorsing any political viewpoints here, just impartially reporting on Conan's stated strategy from the source material.
Right, exactly. His philosophy, and I think it's smart for this venue, is that anger simply doesn't make for great comedy in that specific room. And he made a very interesting point that absurd politics are actually very hard to satirize effectively. Reality is often weirder than the joke. He's aiming for a specific vibe, more celebration, less biting political commentary. He basically wants to bring the party back to the party.
And for the pre-show, we've got Amelia de Maldenberg back on the red carpet.
Which is brilliant synergy. Her interview style, if you've seen her Chicken Shop Date series, creates those viral, awkward, charming moments.
It's so vastly different from the traditional Ryan Seacrest style of interviewing.
It is. It really humanizes the nominees. Instead of just, who you wearing or tell us about your character's journey, you get these weird, funny interactions regarding their favorite late-night snacks or terrible dating advice. The studio campaigns secretly love it because it makes their heavily guarded stars look relatable on TikTok. It helps reach a much younger demographic that might not care at all about the DGA awards.
Speaking of humanizing, I saw a bit of sweet gossip in the reports about Kate Hudson.
Yes. The rumor that she wants her mom, Goldie Hawn, as her date for the ceremony.
Yeah, I just love that.
It turns the night into a broader family story rather than just an isolated career milestone. And the press absolutely eats that up. It's a very smart narrative, but it also feels completely genuine. It reminds everyone of the lineage, that classic Hollywood royalty aspect, but in a very warm, approachable way.
And looking at the stage itself, we know some of the presenters. Last year's acting winners are back. Adrian Brody, Mikey Madison, Kieran Culkin, Zoe Saldana.
And this leads directly to what insiders call conspiracy math.
Go on. I love a bit of conspiracy math.
People in the industry try to figure out who is presenting which category to figure out who might win. Like, if Zoe Saldana is presenting Best Actor, does that mean the producers secretly expect Michael B. Jordan to win because they worked together on some project? Or because the producers just want a very specific photo op for the front pages the next day?
Does that kind of tracking ever actually work out?
It's usually complete nonsense. The producers don't know who wins until the envelope is open either. The accounting firm keeps it locked down. But it's part of the game. It keeps the blogs busy for the 48 hours before the show. It adds to the mythology and the suspense of the night.
It's the sport of it.
It is. The Oscars are part art, part sport.
So we're heading rapidly toward March 15th. We've got this incredible tension between the record-breaking 16-nomination run of Sinners and the undeniable craftsmanship consensus of One Battle after another.
And you absolutely cannot forget the wild card of Hamnet and the surge of the international films.
Plus the new casting category shaking up the very structure of the season and forcing us to look at the how a movie is made and not just the what. It really feels like a pivotal year for the industry.
It does. It feels like the industry is actively trying to decide what it wants to be in the latter half of the 2020s. Are we a global industry? Are we a blockbuster industry? Or are we strictly a craft industry?
So here is the question we want to leave you with, to mull over before the broadcast. And it goes right back to that fascinating psychological point you made earlier.
Right. In a year where one film Sinners, breaks the all-time nomination record with 16 nods. Does the industry instinctively want to crown it to validate that success? To loudly say to the world, yes, this is the absolute peak of what we do? Or does the sheer massive size of that success trigger a subconscious desire to look elsewhere, to say, you've already won by being this big, let's give the trophy to someone else?
It's the ultimate question of momentum versus the underdog reflex, the desire to reward massive success versus the desire to redistribute the glory. And we won't know the real answer until that final envelope opens.
That's the fun of it.
We'll be watching on March 15th, and we hope you will too, keeping all these behind-the-scenes narratives in mind.
Yes.
Knowing all this makes the show a whole lot more interesting than just judging the dresses.
Although, let's be real, addresses are nice too.
They definitely are. Thanks for diving into the sources with us today. Catch you next time.